morning, everyone. So, the story of the Cry of Delores. This would have been for September 16th, but we had some technical difficulties and we're behind a little bit, but that's all right. Father Hidalgo, Miguel Hidalgo y Castillo, was the man is credited with being the father of Mexico. Father Hidalgo was born on May 8th, 1753, near Guanajuato, which is in Mexico today. As a child, he lost his mother. His mother died when he was 9 years old. And then he was sent, him and his older brother, to Valladolid to continue his education. He attended college at the Colegio de San Nicolas, and after completing his studies there, he went on to study philosophy and theology at the Royal Pontifical University of Mexico. He graduated in 1773. He then became an ordained priest and returned to Colegio San Nicolas to teach in 1778, and he taught philosophy and Latin and theology, teaching 3 different subjects. Wow, Father Hidalgo was a free thinker. It seemed that he wasn't really interested in being a traditional Catholic priest. He was attracted to the Enlightenment age from Europe and was sort of in that wavelength. He's described as he socialized freely. He's kind of a man of the people, it sounds to me, when I'm reading up on him. He also owned properties and had multiple children out of wedlock, so not a traditional priest. But there's other things that happened, and we don't always know the truth about everything. In 1790, he became rector at San Nicolas, but his behavior had drawn scrutiny of other faculty members who accused him of mismanaging funds, and he left the school in 1792. It seems to me that Hidalgo had a spotty past. You know, sometimes guys like that are the ones that are the exact right person for when it's time to go. But that does point to many things there. In 1803, Father Hidalgo moved to Dolores to replace the priest who had just passed away. He studied as many languages as he could. He wanted to be educated as much as possible. He did community outreach, constantly serving those that are underprivileged and in need. The way he did this was he would hold workshops for trades like carpentry and blacksmith, where he would teach these people how to do trade work, and that was so empowering. So with all these things, Hidalgo did become networked with intellectual circles that were concerned of the politics dealing with Spain. And when Napoleon Bonaparte defeated Spain and forced out King Ferdinand VII and implanted his brother Joseph in charge of Spanish territories, Hidalgo and his allies figured out a plan to overthrow the new viceroy from Spain and establish a ruling body that was actually loyal to King Ferdinand. That's an interesting point right there. What does that mean? Because Spain was the colonizer, Napoleon taking over Spain, and then as well all of their colonies. It seems strange to me that just that part, that the intellectual circles in New Spain, Mexico, wanted to organize for King Ferdinand's sake. So the question arises, what really was this? You know? If you look at American history, this whole theater is very complex, as you can see. I mean, it's like George Washington in 1755 worked for Great Britain. He was the senior colonel aide to the British General Edward Braddock. And this was the largest British military expedition ever in the colonies. Very interesting. That's 2 stories of colonial powers mixing with their colonies leaders to battle the French specifically. We're gonna have to look into that. So they were making these plans to overthrow Napoleon and the viceroy that was in charge and gain independence. And unfortunately, word got out. it got back to Hidalgo that Spain found out about his plans, and so he had to fast track the idea. The way that happened was the independence movement began when Jose Bernardo Gutierrez de Lara went to the small town of Delores and talked to none other than the Roman Catholic priest there, who happened to be Father Hidalgo. So that's how that started. And Gutierrez de Lara went to Washington, D.C. after speaking with Hidalgo to ask the U.S. for military support. This would be the first Mexican ever to do that. In the meantime, word got out to the Spanish, and one can only make guesses on how that happened. I can make a few guesses, the timing of the event. Gutierrez going to the US, who happens to be like a neo-colonizer, and also had relations with Spain and France. Those relations were not necessarily good, but the problem is when you're dealing with world powers, there's always a get back. You could tell somebody in the office, hey, we're trying to make independence, and that person might just have some sort of reason to tell your enemies. So Hidalgo got word that the word got out, and so he's fearing arrest. And early morning on September 16th, 1810 at 2:30 a.m., he implored the town sheriff to release 80 of the imprisoned independence activists that were in prison. And then early that morning, he rang the bell and made the Cry of Delores, as we know, which told everybody, in a nutshell, it's time to take a stand against the colonists. Now, the exact words of this speech, which is the most famous speech in the history of Mexico, actually not written down. So they can only sort of paraphrase based off of word of mouth, I suppose. But I'll read it right now. This is coming from Wikipedia. The essential spirit of the message is, my children, a new dispensation comes to us today. Will you receive it? Will you free yourselves? Will you recover this land stolen 300 years ago from your forefathers by the hated Spaniards? You must act at once. Will you defend your religion and your rights as true patriots? Long live Our Lady of Guadalupe. Death to bad government. Death to the Gashapinas. There's also another version that's more of like other people might have been saying it during his speech from the crowd. He continues, will you be slaves of Napoleon, or will you as patriots defend your religion, your hearts, and your rights? And after that, there was a unanimous cry in support. We will defend at the utmost. Long live religion. Long live our most holy mother of Guadalupe. Long live America. Death to bad government. Death to the Gashapinas. Just interesting, right? Father Hidalgo, with military captain Ignacio Allende, led a makeshift army of mestizos, Native Americans, and Creoles. And they took over San Miguel, Celaya, and Guanajuato. See, Father Hidalgo was excommunicated from the church at this time. So, everything happens for a reason. Maybe that was the push he needed. And also, it wasn't unjust. By the looks of it, he definitely transgressed his priestly role, and that can get you excommunicated. But that didn't deter him from doing his real purpose. Hidalgo formed a provisional government during this time that decreed an end to slavery and the restitution of lands to the indigenous peoples. So we can say Father Hidalgo not only is the father of Mexico, but quite possibly the father of the Emancipation Proclamation. Father Hidalgo was captured a year later in modern-day San Antonio and was beheaded. Hidalgo died with honor. Onlookers reported that they were impressed by his gallantry in front of the fireman squad. So every year on September 16th, the President of Mexico reenacts Father Hidalgo's speech. They named his old parish town after him, Dolores Hidalgo, as well as the state of Mexico called Hidalgo. I would even venture to say that the move of Gutierrez going to the US government for help, knowing that Hidalgo wanted to end slavery and provide restitution for lands to indigenous people, that would have been something the US would have not wanted, and could have easily made the United States an enemy of Mexico also. Father Hidalgo was a man of substance. Father Hidalgo was a visionary, and I think that also explains some of his behavior. Not giving a shit. Sometimes visionaries are like that. More to come.